when it connects. Oh, hello everybody, and welcome to another Sports Community live stream. I'm Steve Pallas, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Richard Simon, President, Ormond Amatuer Football Club. Richard, welcome.
Hi, Steve. Great to be here.
Yeah, no, really look forward to the discussion. And I guess you've got another hat. Your professional hat is the CEO of Parks and Leisure Victoria. So you come at thing. You've got the community sport experience, but also kind of looking at it from an industry perspective as well. So it'd be interesting to compare and contrast how that
There's a bit of an extension to that too, Steve, because I'm a sports and recreation planning consultant. So I've got that as my business, and then one of the contracts is as you said, the executive officer of Parks and Leisure Australia, which exposes me to all sorts of different sports trends and activation. So it'll be an interesting discussion to tie all that together, as well as you say, my 7 years as president of Ormond Amatuer Footy Club.
7 years. That's what you haven't worked out this whole succession planning thing yet?
Look, a lot of people ask me about that. I initially went on for 5. So when I first put my hand up for presidency, I said that, I'll definitely do it for 5 years, because I think it's important that, a president and to some extent the committee that probably remains reasonably stable, under a president, has a bit of time to make some change. And so that 5 years came, and still there. And I've got 2 sons that play in the seniors. So I'm going to be around anyway, Steve. So, to me, it hasn't been a real issue to continue on. I've got a fantastic committee. So, we can perhaps touch on some of that later on.
I vividly remember many years ago standing at it was a game of AFL football, and the incoming president was talking to the outgoing president, and the incoming president says, "What? Who should we be recruiting for next year? The year hadn't even started, and who should we be looking at recruiting?" And the outgoing president looked at him dead set in the eyes and said, "The greatest recruit you will ever make is the next president." and I always remembered that, and I found myself in a conversation about 7 years later with that same 2 people, and I brought it up, and they both agreed that it was the best advice that they'd ever have. Let's put your consulting hat on first and go, well, how have you seen COVID affect sports clubs and sports through your discussions with clubs and peak bodies and councils?
Yeah, well, I guess the key question and the key issue has been finance and the financial sustainability of clubs. And obviously it's mainly winter clubs that I'm referring to there because of the mid-March initial shutdown. But that was the biggest concern that obviously reverberated around all clubs, was how they were going to get through, because there were still going to be expenses that were going to come through, given that the timing of the first cessation of training and play was on the brink of most of the commencement dates of the winter sports seasons. There were all these expenses that clubs already had, and then there was this lack of clarity on whether revenue was actually going to occur in the traditional forms, and so that's been a big issue. And I think as COVID continued, particularly in Victoria, Steve, the duration of it has obviously meant that there's been a bit of a disconnect now between clubs and their players, and in some respects volunteers and staff. So I think there's a concern now emerging amongst, again, winter clubs particularly, that they may not be able to have all of those people come back to the club. For whatever reason, people have chosen, they had a year off and they've thought, oh, this is good. Or there's other pressures, that people have lost jobs, and there's other priorities in their lives. So I think that's now a concern that a lot of winter clubs are now going through, is what 2021 might mean, and the lead up to 2021 in relation to personnel, whether it's on field or off field.
Yeah, absolutely. And welcome to everybody that's watching the live stream, watching the live stream. If you've got any questions for Richard, got any thoughts, got any comments, what's the challenges that you're having at your club? What do you see the future challenges? Please say hello in the chat, in the comments, and ask your questions. We'd love for you to join the conversation. For us, it was a really early, and I think we're beyond this now, but for us, we saw clubs, yes, the financial challenge, but then they were also then really concerned about whether they should even be fundraising at a time where we saw great big long queues at Centrelink, and they got this feeling that it was insensitive to be going to their members and asking, which we now know that people wanted to help their clubs if they were able to, and we've seen that in droves. So I'll go back to kind of about 10:15 on Friday the 13th. The Grand Prix gets cancelled. In the next 72 hours, our business changes. Sports is shut down. How did your club react and respond, and take us through that thinking?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, the first thing that I did was ensure that by Facebook to the players' Facebook page and also to the open and public page of the club to put up a notification that training had to cease immediately, and that a decision on the commencement of the season was now going to be pending. So, for us, our season was due to start. I think it was either the 4th or the 6th of April. Anyway, it was the Saturday of the first Saturday in April, and which was only 3 weeks away at the time of that announcement. And so, the committee, the supporters, the players, everyone had been building up to this commencement only 3 weeks away. So we obviously needed to let people know that not only training but the season was going to be delayed. And then, for me, it was about getting the committee together and understanding how we were going to respond in a way that was going to manage our way through, the process of return to play and return to train. And so we formed an executive, or we made the decision that the executive would take on, a role to respond to COVID, because, and I shared this with you a couple of weeks ago, Steve, and the main reason for that was, and it wasn't to cut out the other committee people, but it was to ensure that we had a very quick decision-making process, because, as people will recall, from mid-March to about, mid-April, the goalposts and the information was changing almost daily. So we didn't have a system within the club that could respond very quickly, and so that was really good. And the executive of 5, we then had a subcommittee that was formed, and it was myself, the treasurer, and another committee person who happens to be a financial planner. So we then formed we'll call it a finance subcommittee. I don't know if we actually ever called it that, but it was really, to respond and to come up with some an immediate assessment of where the club's financial position was and what the implication was going to be in the short term, meaning the next 4 weeks. Because we had, payments due. Our first payment round for our paid staff is the 1st of April. We have a 1st of April, a mid-July, and then a end of September. So there's 3 payments. So we basically had a payment due, in 2 weeks, and not enough money in the bank to pay for that. Ormond Amateur Footy Club's probably like, I don't know, you'd know better than me, Steve, the percentage, but perhaps 90% of clubs operate effectively on a hand-to-mouth basis. We have very little reserves. It's something that we're aware of, and we each year we try to build up the reserves, but with very little success. And anyway, so we were faced with the issue of these bills that were there for paid staff and some other expenses. But the 3 weeks leading into the season, which is really when most of the revenue comes into a club, through sponsors, members signing up, players paying their subs, etc., that being taken away from us. So we had to set up I guess an immediate response to that issue, and then to look to see how the season might pan out financially as well. So that sort of finance subcommittee was very important. But so I guess governance-wise, Steve, that's really how we responded in the short term, was to have the executive understand that we were going to have a very fluid and dynamic and ongoing, dialogue, and that there was a finance subcommittee that would be charged with the responsibility of advising that executive committee on decisions around finance.
Yeah, and you're right. It almost happened to the day, at the worst day that could possibly have happened for a winter club, isn't it? You've almost incurred a significant amount of your expenses, the jumpers, uniforms, equipment, etc., for the year have been purchased. The coaches of players or whatever have done a very strong pre-season, long pre-season, and the revenue just about to come in that 3-week period. So then you worked out your financial position, and that's where we kind of in our training say, well, that's where we've got to start, is the financial position, and empower the committee to understand what the financial position is. Because I'm very strongly of the belief that if you know what the financial position is, regardless of how bad it is, no club should go under. They should be able to manage their way out of it if you know it. So what then did you, how did you respond? Because as you said, you didn't have enough money to pay the bills that were due in the coming, due and payable in the coming weeks. So then how did you respond to that and work your way through that process?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Steve. I actually, almost immediately after, the subcommittee, the finance subcommittee, realised we didn't have the money to be able to pay, as you say, the merchandise that had been ordered, the club jumpers, and also the coaches and other staff. I actually got on the phone and rang 2 people. One of them was the president of the junior footy club, the Ormond Junior Footy Club, which is obviously a co-tenant at the reserve, and I also rang the president of the Ormond Cricket Club. Again, obviously the other co-tenant, the summer co-tenant, and said, I'm wondering if I can borrow some money on behalf of the Ormond Footy Club from you guys to get us out of what I hope will be a short-term pickle. And at that stage, Steve, everyone was very confident football would commence. I'm saying, oh, look, it'll all roll over in the next 4 or 5 weeks, and we'll then be back to playing again, and we'll have income coming in through those traditional streams of player subs, sponsorships, financial members, etc. And I guess such is the collegiality between the 3 clubs, and it's both presidents basically said how much. It wasn't that's a, don't know what I'm going to. How do I answer that, Richard? No, but no, they both said how much, and so we went into a discussion about what the quantum of the loans would be, and they were substantial, and we drafted up an agreement. So each of those 2 clubs loaned us an amount of money. We were then able to pay our bills, and then we went into a process to strategize how we were going to actually generate that revenue to not only pay back the loans, but also obviously then to have the club back to where it needed to be for round 1, whenever that was going to be. And initially I think it was the 25th of July or the 1st of August were the 2 dates that were mooted for most of the winter as being the return date. So that was, it was just an unbelievable gesture from those 2 clubs. We've now paid back the loans, and we've ultimately had quite a good season financially, as it turned out. And some of the things that we did, Steve, was contacted our sponsors, explained the situation to them, and we I think it was 7 or it might have been 8 sponsors said, look, our commitment, as it was going to be for 2020, will remain as is, whether there's a season or no season. Now, of those eight sponsors that responded, I think 5 or 6 of them had that proposition to us, that they said, we don't care if there's no season, which is terrific. And that obviously, again, is a decision that's probably grounded or founded on loyalty, long-term, long-term partnership. And then a couple of the other sponsors said, look, we're happy to pay, or we're in a position where we can pay half. Some of those sponsors obviously were, they didn't have a very good, forecast themselves. So they had to look at what they were doing. So, and the other thing that we'd done, Steve, and this was pre-COVID. So I think it was January this year. So it was before COVID even became a word in our language, because it is a word in our language now. We signed up with the Australian Sports Foundation and created a funding page on that to basically assist the club to build up reserves. And that was really, one of the planks of that page was to assist the club to build up its resources so that it could continue to provide the best environment for its players and supporters. And, with the offer, obviously, that any donation was going to be tax deductible. So there was a bit of a win-win. And we'd already started, having memberships go through that, etc. But that then became a fairly important, proposition to our members, Steve, if your situation was that you could donate. So we generated, I think it was about $8,000. There's the page. So you'll see there that there's already 24,000 generated. So in the short term, we generated about $8,000. So that has built up considerably, obviously, since, and that's through an ongoing campaign and partnership with our membership and also our supporters. The other item that we jump straight onto, Steve, and it is a fundraiser that we do have as a matter of course each season, but we rarely, or certainly for the last probably 4 or 5 years, we haven't actually sold all the tickets, and that is like a lucky number draw. We call it the 200 Club. So there's 100 tickets or 100 numbers at $200 each. So the net revenue's $20,000, and we draw out a number each week during the season for $200, and then there's 15 rounds, and then there's 3 rounds where there's a $600, and the total payout's about $4,500. So we went on a really hard sell of that fundraiser, Steve, and again the proposition was that we need to generate funds quickly. We need to understand that. Or the membership, and I was really transparent with them, the membership needed to understand that we had these obligations of payments to suppliers as well as coaching and football staff. And we sold that out, I think, in about a week. And as I said, historically, we've run that fundraiser, but we generally sell about 60 to 70 tickets. So to sell the full consignment was just outstanding. So that generated $20,000 immediately. And then obviously there was the incremental payments. So that was a really good option. First off, there was obviously the $1,000 payment by the state government, or the claim that sports clubs could have, which was really important. And then financial members. So we've got probably 25 to 30 financial members. Again, it's an area that we want to build up, but again, we'd already had about probably 20 to 25 that had already signed up, and we got about another 10, even though the season really wasn't going to sign up. So there were a number of avenues, Steve, that were able to generate revenue fairly quickly, and as a result, we were able to do a couple of payments to those 2 tenant clubs. And then during the course of the season, as it unfolded, there was obviously that return to train period for about, I think it was 5 weeks. Yep. And we were able to we did another fundraising campaign, and that was specifically around donations and using the ASF portal in the 3 weeks before the end of the financial year. So it was at the same time as the return to train occurred, which was from the 1st of June. It was cancelled the season was cancelled on the 1st of June. So it was in that period anyway, in the lead up to the financial year, where we ran another campaign, so that, the proposition to supporters was that if you're in a position where you can donate to the club, you will get a tax receipt that can then be used in your 2019, 2020 income tax statement. So there were a few things that we did, Steve, and I think the real icing on the cake for us was that the Glen Ira City Council had a COVID impact grant scheme and support scheme for its businesses, community organisations, and also sporting clubs. And we made a grant application to that, and our application was based on revenue impacted by COVID. We demonstrated that we had to take out 2 loans with our co-tenants, and that we had obligations to pay them back. And so we were successful in getting a $9,000 grant from council, which went quite a long way to paying back the 2 clubs the loans. So there are a number of avenues that we sought, Steve. Some of them short term, and others that lasted really through that whole football period of training, right up until late June, early July.
I mean, Richard, that's fantastic just to be able to share that story with us, because it kind of probably goes from a despair situation to very positive. So if I can go back to the start, and I think it probably can't be underestimated that the relationships that you'd built up over those 7 years, you were able to call on those. But one of the things when clubs work out their position and they're not, and through no fault of their own, they're not in a great position either now or then or in the future, I think it's important to know that it's not a burden that you need to share by yourself, is it? I mean, you just picked up the phone and rang co-tenants, there's councils, the Peak Sports Body. There's actually a lot of experience now around that we've gained as a community over the last 6 months of how to work our way out of that. So I think that's the first thing, particularly for inexperienced committees, and don't take
the burden yourself.
Yeah. And then I'm really interested, because you went really early to the membership. And again, just going back to my comment earlier where clubs didn't know whether they should be fundraising or not, you went hard at it. What was the feedback from the members when you kind of were really strong in the fundraising? And I'll come to sponsors separately in a minute, but just asking members for money and stuff.
Yeah, well, I guess when we did that initial call out to subscribe in the 200 club, so to sell those 100 numbers, I guess it was still very early in COVID, Steve. So there were probably, a lot of people who were still working and probably didn't really have a full understanding of where they might be in, 2 months, like, by May or June, etc. So that was probably one reason why it was very successful. But I think the other thing was that I was just brutally honest with the membership, Steve. I just said to them, "We've got these bills." I said, "These, some of these coaches, have been with the players, since mid-November, we're now at mid-March. We're 2 weeks away from their first payment, so they've basically not been paid anything, through the pre-season." I wasn't about to go to those coaches and to that football staff who'd been working, for the last four months and say that we haven't got any money to pay for you. The other option, and I'm sure this is an option that a lot of clubs do in that situation, Steve, it's either the president that bears the financial burden, and he or she may come good with the money just out of I guess loyalty to the club, or there may be other members who might provide those loans as well. Well, I just thought that in that situation of COVID, that it was an unreasonable request to be making on people because of the uncertainty, and that's really why I spoke to the junior club and the cricket club, and it's through the relationship that we have, and that I was aware that they do have reserves. So it wasn't as though I knew I was knocking on a door that may not have had the capacity, Steve. So I think that's important for people, that are listening today to understand that, I knew that they had some capacity to probably, agree to the request that I was making of them. But I think, so I think that's the story about some of that initial gain, Steve, is that people, understood exactly where we were as a club. And secondly, it was quite early in COVID, but some of that donation that occurred, subsequent to COVID really setting in, that building up of 24,000 there, a lot of that was through the period right through until probably early August, and that was just blew us away. Really, it blew us away. The committee, on the generosity of the membership and the supporter base, and to some extent, it when I've reflected on it, it's sort of a little bit frustrating in a way, Steve, because I'm thinking, gee, why don't these people buy membership during the year when we're in a normal year? And we probably may not have been in this situation because we would have been able to build up reserves. But look, everyone's got their own reasons why they do or don't purchase club memberships. But it was great that we had that I guess trust and that loyalty and feeling from our supporters that they really wanted to dig in and assist the club. But before we go there, Steve, can I just say one thing? And it is about the cricket club and the junior footy club. And I think it's a bit of a lesson that, maybe other committee people that are listening today, probably there's a real story there, and there's a real, I think the relationship that you have with your co-tenants is critical. And, obviously operationally, there are reasons why it's good to have a good relationship so that people know what each other's doing, and particularly during the period of crossover of seasons, that there's a really good cooperation and understanding of each group's needs. But for us, obviously, it's gone way, way beyond that in terms of, the ability of a co-tenant to say, yeah, here's a loan to get you over, a 2 or 3 month hiccup, was just incredible. And so I really, the learning out of that, I think, for others, is to don't underestimate how valuable the relationships are with your co-tenants and work on them. Be transparent and open, and it might be that you need to lean on them like I had to lean on the cricket and the junior footy club this year. There'll be a time when you have to lean on each other, and to know that collegiality is there and that support was just unbelievable for us.
Oh, unquestionably. And the other thing that I think can't be underestimated was, and I'm really kind of talking to new and inexperienced committees, is, again, going back to that, don't take the burden by yourself. You had the confidence to, a bit of a cliche in sport at the moment is show the vulnerability. You didn't carry the burden by yourself. Yeah. You opened up. This is the situation of the club. You did, we see so many times presidents not want to take bad news to the members, and for whatever reason, hold it back. And then, AGM, we have to. And so therefore they do, and it blows up. Whereas, so often the feedback from the membership is, why don't you tell us? Because then we could. So the two things that I love about what you did and that underpin the success coming through and out of COVID was you shared those stories, you shared the vulnerability. Well, you worked out what the vulnerability was, you shared it, but then you gave people multiple ways of contributing and if they could. And it's no surprise to me that the 200 club filled up when it hasn't before, but also, that loan by presidents, loan by secretaries, loan by affluent people. Well, but you didn't just kind of do it back of the envelope. You did it through the Sports Foundation, which allowed them to get a donation which they could, be of benefit to them. And so so you create all these different avenues for people to be able to help the club. And that's what people don't realize. The membership wants to help, and they can. And I think that's such a wonderful illustration of a club helping each other and the community helping each other through.
Yeah, so we keep our membership pretty simple. There's $1,000, $300, or $100. So it's community membership is the $100, $300 is the brown and blue, and the $1,000 is the Monsman. And again, so you can see that even for people with the $100, that was very reachable for them, knowing that they were able then to get it was effectively a $100 receipt or tax deductible receipt that they were going to be able to use. So we had a lot of $100 donations, but as you know, it's the pyramid story. The more you can get at that lower end, it creates an amount of money, but secondly, the buy-in. There's so many people that have bought into the club, just from their own $100 contribution, and so that was a really important part of it, and I hope that perhaps some people will realise the vulnerability of sports clubs through this process. That their small contribution each year, but given the critical mass, absolutely means an enormous amount to the financial sustainability of sports clubs. Yeah.
Is it in final? My last closing question: is it your intention to keep going with the donation strategy as a fundraising strategy moving forward post COVID?
Haven't thought about it to be brutally honest, but we'd be mad not to, because just for the people who buy a membership each year, for them now to have the opportunity of claiming that as a donation, means that it's giving them something back that they don't even have to pay any money for. In fact, they're getting a reimbursement. So we'll keep it for sure. And by virtue of what you just put up there, Steve, before, 24,500 or what have you, out of a target of 30, was just outstanding. So we'll probably reinvent that a little bit, but at the end of the day, I recommend to all sports clubs to have a look at the Australian Sports Foundation and what it might be able to do for your revenue strategies.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Richard, thank you so much for sharing your journey and opening up. And again, the cliche, but it is so true. But it's, sharing the vulnerability of the club and how you work through that to actually to get in a positive position. Well, not just financially, but with connection with people and excitement of the club as they move into, or as you move into the true off season and in 2021. So. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you, everyone. Hope it's been value.
I learned a lot. So, and I'm sure that everyone else that watches the video will as well. So, Richard, thank you. Tomorrow, as normal, Esport Friday, and as I say about this time every week, I have no idea what we're talking about before, during, and usually after that conversation. So join us and we'll go into that dark world of esport, but there is a huge amount that we're learning from esport that can be brought into traditional sports. So until then, I'm Steve Pallas. Richard, thank you so much, and thank you for being part of our sports community.